Okay, I guess we'll call the work session for August 10th, 2022 to order. Caitlin?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. We do have a work session that we're going to start off with here for DRH 21-00008 at 2850 West Fletcher Street. Oh yeah, I'm sure. The location is south of Fairview Avenue at Whitewater Park Boulevard. You can see it's composed of all of these parcels. So at the May 12th, 2021 design review hearing, the committee approved the project with these additional requirements to come back with at a public work session. So the additional information shall be submitted and a future advertised public work session shall be held to address the following: a finalized traffic impact study and ACHD conditions of approval with detailed alignment for Fletcher Street extension, and then any changes that causes to occur. And then Fletcher Street shall be redesigned as a town center local with detached 5-foot sidewalks and planting strips with street trees. And then the redesign of the Fletcher Street elevation on the east and west mixed-use buildings. We were looking for additional transparency and the prevention of blank walls. So the applicant has submitted some updated drawings. This was the original site plan. So we have the two multifamily buildings and then the office building. And this is the updated site plan. So things did shift a little bit to accommodate the street alignment. You just go back and forth one more time so you can look at it again. It's pretty similar, but some changes there. And then these are the areas that we are specifically looking at for those different wall treatments. This was what was originally proposed. So that was what you probably saw at that hearing. And then the applicant has provided some updated design ideas. So you can let the applicant team walk you through what those changes were. And then our suggested motion is to approve the work session drawings dated received July 5th, 2022, and the drawings, discussion, and findings contained in the work session memo for the hearing dated August 10th, 2022, with some additional conditions. The first is that the streetscape planters and planting strips shall be a minimum of 8 feet in width unless the applicant provides written approval from ACHD allowing to be planted in the narrower proposed 6-foot width. The ACHD approval did note that they needed the 8 feet. So in order to get those trees in there, we'd want to see something from ACHD that says they'll accept the 6 feet. And then the second condition is if the unopened Fletcher Street right-of-way is vacated as proposed, then we would want to coordinate with Boise Parks and the Planning Division to provide the pathway within a permanent public easement. That pathway access to the greenbelt exists in the right-of-way currently. So if that's vacated, we would want to put that in a public easement. And with that, I will turn it over to the applicant.
Great, thank you. If you would please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jay Gibbons. I'm with South Beck and Barrett here in Boise, Idaho. We led this project through the entitlement process, and so in compliance with the condition that the city put on us at our original DR hearing was to have this work session so that we could provide some updated information and what have you. So since a year ago, we have an architect out of Seattle, different than our entitlement architect. Anyways, he's been working on construction drawings. We are working on the west phase, the apartment building and the office. The building at the corner of Fletcher 27th and Fairview is phase 2. There'll be similar buildings and materials and what have you, and I'll show you some of that in a minute. We spent all fall and winter working with the ACHD to go through our traffic impact statement, and most of that revolved around alignment of Whitewater where it crosses Fairview, because north leg of Whitewater off of Fairview is two-way and has a turn lane that goes on to Fairview, which is a 7-lane road. And we only need 2 lanes coming into our project to connect to Fletcher, and that offset, it was funky. You can go that way, you can go, it was, so we sorted all through that. So we now have the alignment correct. We have the proper slim down and turning radius onto Fletcher and the Fletcher Street improvements. They required what's still shown on the site plan that will go away is that loading zone that's right on the north side of Fletcher at 27th. ASHD said, no, it's too close to the intersection. So it will be part of the parkway. The other aspect of our condition was to redesign the Fletcher frontage with regard to the town center design, which required trees in a parkway. And we were able to do that. We do have a separated sidewalk. Guess I'm going the wrong way. There we go. I have a separated sidewalk, and it's a 6-foot planter, and it will have in compliance with ASHD's requirements. It'll have rigid root barrier panels so that we can accomplish the trees in that slightly narrower section there in the parkway. Also, part of ASHD's requirement was, and part of the city's overall Fairview plan, if you are familiar with the St. Luke's that's being built on Fairview and 27th across from us, the bioswale treatment along Fairview is what we're matching on our Fairview frontage to the west to the bridge there. ASHD now wants those 8 feet wide instead of 7, which was in the plan. So we'll be widening that to 8. That's not a problem because they want trees in it too. So, but it's also bioswale and it needs to treat a lot of stormwater coming off of Franklin. So we have gone through the whole process with ASHD. They've approved with conditions. And so we're working on that so that we can get the site plan all worked out. Architects are working on the buildings as well. And I believe that my architects are zoomed in case you have architectural questions, hopefully. I think they are. Grant Siemens or Robert Brown, are they online? Do you know? Okay, good. They're here as a resource. So we've been working with HURAA Architecture out of Seattle. The basic building footprint is the same. They have updated the facades as far as there's more relief especially on the Fletcher side. We needed to do something where the little 2-story kick out there, that is actually storage units for residents in apartments. It's 2-story, and that'll be similar on both buildings. There's the first 2 stories, of course, are parking garage on podium, and then there's 5 stories of apartments above that. And so these storage units are for the residents, and they attached in the parking garage area itself or just off of it. And they've upgraded that with some vertical elements that break up that expanse. There's also what you see there is a row of horizontal windows that are at the top of the first story. So they're not, they can't make them so transparent. They're just looking into somebody's storage unit. And so we think we've broken that up better. The wall of the apartments above, you can see similar vertical elements that are actually, those do kick out from the building face in that they're going to carry mechanical connections to the apartments that way as well. And then we have treatments on the ends of the building where you have grates and openings of the garage, the parking garage on the first floor itself, and it's open air above. And then there's the storefront type of window there at the end of the entrance to the garage, just off of the storage. And on the Fairview side, we have the storefront on the corner there where the retail is necessary. And then you can see the grates and the different textures and different materials that are on that facade. And again, those kickouts, the little columns in between the apartments are the purpose is to provide vertical element as well as carry mechanical. And it really, it breaks up that expanse of those walls even better than you know what was originally proposed. The office building itself, that has changed in before it was a 4-story office building and it had parking on the first under everything. We had to upgrade because of the amount of space that was being proposed. Now we have the same 2-story podium parking. We still have 4 still have 3 levels of office above that. So it actually, it's 5 stories now. And if we need to come back and modify our application for that 5 versus 4, we're willing to do that as well. But that's something that's a change to the office building itself. We ensured that the corners of that office building are out of the river setback and such things, and work with the separation between the 2 buildings. They're connected between the 2 buildings to the parking garage itself. You can enter in under the apartment part of the garage and access the office garage as well as from the ground floor on both. The landscape will be updated accordingly. I'm trying to get all the site elements together in one package from the civil so that I can update the landscape plan for our contract documents or construction documents. And those are coming up. So we have, you know, a mixture of textures, colors. There's still steel panels. There's still concrete. There's some stonework accents and the windows openings and various elements like that, and quite a lot of modulation. So with that, I will stand for questions. And if you have questions from our architect, we can loop them in as well.
Great. Thank you. Questions for the committee, for the applicant?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this doesn't really look at all like the project that was approved. And that's just an observation. Maybe do we have any images of the whole thing together, both phases? And
With this particular style, no, because we haven't. This architect has not started work on just the phase 2 of the building. If we go back to Caitlin's image in her presentation that showed what was originally form and function is the same. The materials, colors, and granted, every printer is slightly different than others. So.
right. Caitlin, can you go to the Fairview perspective?
That's Fletcher.
So,
Top one is Fairview.
okay.
So what's different, if you look on the upper left, what's different from then to now, at least on the parking garage, it looks like that is one solid and opening, whereas now we have several openings that, and it had a metal grate frame system over those openings. Previously, we still have a metal grate opening on the new ones, but that wall is, it is not as open as you can see it was original. And then above, it was basically what broke that up was the patios and the windows. It's all one flat except for that, the window element, the verticalness of it lined up. And if you look at the new one, we really have separate colors and columns, and there are vertical elements in between the windows and the patios, in that it's actually created more interest.
Caitlin, would you go back to the new images? So were the changes spurred by comments in the last design review, in the design review approval, or have you submitted a design review modification for all of these updates?
We have not submitted a modification. And I don't know that there was really much discussion on, well, this is really, the original was really bland per se. It's another architect's interpretation, and knowing that the city wanted more interest on the facade. So that's what they try to provide.
I think where I'm going with this is when we've got a pretty marked departure from what was originally approved, is there a mechanism in place for us to reapprove this essentially? Because this doesn't look like the building that was originally submitted. And I'm not saying one way or the other whether that's good or bad. And just this is a different building. I mean, for like massing wise, yeah, it's the same, but this is a different building. So are we talking about whether or not we approve of this building tonight, or is this strictly the realignment of the road and the sizing of some landscape planters?
Well, yeah, I guess that is a good question, and I'm not sure staff if you want to comment on that, but I guess go ahead, Keelan.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, committee members, what you could do is within the work session, we can modify the design of the building as part of a work session. But if you'd like to see like a full set again with the full analysis of the new design, that would be one way to proceed.
Yeah, it looks it's actually even hard to compare, I think, on the plans that we have, kind of the before and after. And I don't believe I was in attendance on the first one, so
And that predated me, so
I guess, yeah, that is probably would be a concern as well. But I guess from a question for the applicant would be, would the desire be to at least get some approval on the site constraint pieces that you've worked with ACHD, landscaping and such, so at least you can move forward on that part of the design? And maybe we just get another work session on elevation materials, because it seems like we could really use comprehensive elevations with the new revisions a little more clearly defined.
So, Mr.
Makes
Chairman,
sense. Yeah.
I do have a question as far as, so what I would hate to do, and I'm not pushing for a yes or no on this from that perspective. What I just want to make sure that, so, okay, if you want to see, have another workshop on the buildings themselves before and the update and what have you, if you want to, and it's just for the building, that's okay. What I don't want to see is then we have another workshop just on the building facades themselves and the materials, colors, what have you, and those treatments. And then you decide that, oh, well, this is too much. Now you're going to have to do a DR mod, which then puts me out a month from the next cutoff and 6 more weeks to the next hearing, or 2 months from the hearing or what have you.
Yeah, and I think we're all pretty sympathetic to that. And I think that as far as what we're capable of doing within this format, I think, you know, maybe it's one more work session and that counts, right? Is that?
If we can get you to a level of comfort with updates to the building and get the buildings where you want to see them, regardless of what they were, what they are hoped to be, then I'm all for that. I have no issue with another workshop with you all at all.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
I would think that Ryan's on the right path there, and that if we had another work session, as the applicant has indicated this evening, there were numerous things that you described there as what has changed, although it's not necessarily something that we can look at and say, this is what it looked like before and this is what it looks like now.
Should have exhibits that are.
Yeah, and it would be nice to have a side by side.
Yeah.
This is what it was. This is what we have now, and just sort of a compendium of the things that have changed. I'd be comfortable with that, and we could move ahead with the roadway types of things this evening. I don't have any problem with that right now.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
I would second that. I would say that, you know, if we can lock in site plan, particularly as it relates to ACHD, then let's go ahead and, yeah, remove variables wherever possible.
Exactly.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I mean, it looks like, I mean, based on what we asked them to come back with for the work session, they've addressed substantially, you know, the 1, 2, and, you know, 3, there's definitely more transparency there. But yeah, I agree that especially with the building going from 4 to 5 stories, some of the other stuff you talked about, I think it's on the right path, right? So, I mean, I guess I'm in agreement with the other parts of the conversation here.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I do have one question for you, sir. You mentioned you have phase 1 and phase 2. Is it your intent that you're going to build phase 1 and then phase 2 sits until you get a comfort level that you can have the market to build it? Or is it just a timing thing that you're going to build phase 1 and move right into phase 2?
It's a timing thing because they're big buildings.
Yes.
And you can't hold off on phase 2 very long because the parking works together and crosses over the top of Whitewater. And so it's important that they go side by side, but from a sequencing, at least, because you got the office, so you got 2 buildings there, the roadway improvements and everything. And then you have the phase 2 is, I mean, then it's everything's in place except the building, and then they can go right into the building from there.
Will we, if we proceed down the path that's been suggested here, will we then be able to see what the phase 2, the other building that we haven't seen this evening?
As I mentioned to staff before the hearing started was I understand that, you know, we're only working on the phase 1 west of Whitewater at current. And I said, it wouldn't surprise me. And I think, frankly, your comfort level is when we start working on phase 2, that we bring that building. I mean, we expect that those 2 buildings are going to be the same, you know, as far as materials and the look and feel, because they are the same height and what have you. But yeah, certainly to come back with a workshop and update you on that building timing wise and what it really looks like in the end, that's important too. So I don't have a problem with keeping that open for that.
Okay.
Any questions for the applicant? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public wishing to testify in our work session today? Anybody online? Josh? Seeing none, we will close this part of the public portion of the work session, bring back to the committee for discussion and a motion. So I guess sounds to me like everybody's comfortable with the adjustments on the site plan per the requirements from the last site-specific conditions. So unless there's any comments on those, sounds like they're working through with ACHD on items. I didn't see any problems with those, but anybody else have any comments or issues? Then the question is just giving enough direction, I think, to the applicant for what you want to see at a future work session for the architecture of the buildings. So I guess I would suggest that we have a kind of a comprehensive set of documents like you would on a standard DR application with the new pieces, including materials and the works, perspectives, and the phasing is kind of weird. I guess that one kind of challenges me a little bit. It'd be nice to see to approve the full project, phase 1 and phase 2, if that's possible to have both buildings in there. If not, I guess on the approval on the work session, it'd be nice to show that as a future and not be approved at that point. And I think they'd be coming back with a different DR submittal for that phase. But I don't know whether having it works, depending on how that piece kind of comes and goes. I don't know if it's
Mr.
a
Chair.
work sessionable piece without knowing what that is.
I think the difficulty there is, while we can phase building permits to handle foundations and core, it's kind of hard to phase a DR approval based on different phases.
If it's a construction phase, that's great. But if they're doing just construction, you're moving from phase 1 to phase 2, we might as well just approve what the whole thing looks like at this work session,
Right.
next work session.
As far as, how the entitlement relates to the construction process,
I think we've done that.
we've got to have the entire building approved if it's really intending to be all built essentially at one time or kind of transition from one to the next. So it would make sense to me that we approve the entire building, or both phases.
Yep.
At the next work session. I
guess
that you think that's attainable? Okay.
I mean, then I guess at that point, if there's additional modifications to phase 2, it's a full DR mod, probably not at a work session anymore. So I think what we're doing here is probably, this is a departure enough that we want to see it at a work session. Otherwise, we would just kick it back for approve the existing elevations as originally presented, and they could come back for a full mod. Or right now, we would approve the next work session, the full building, phase 1, phase 2. And if there happens to be some changes to phase 2 that you're not comfortable with, they just have to address that in the modification application.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I'm a little uncomfortable approving the second phase in the work session because I'm just concerned about precedents here and then other projects in the future that I don't know if this is a good precedent to do this.
Can you maybe expand on what your concern is? That it's not going to get built, or that the architecture is not going to be?
Well, I think I understand from a constructability, getting it to market, the timing, all that. I'm in construction. I totally appreciate that part of it. But we do have a process that's a public process. And folks need to submit appropriate applications and go through the process and get reviewed by staff. And I guess I'd be concerned down the road if we have another. I mean, to me, this is a high profile project on a really important intersection, significant part of the community. And we have other projects that are being teed up and are going to come to us at some point. And I don't want to give, I want to make sure the developers go through the appropriate process and also give the community also the opportunity with the appropriate process to review and comment as well.
Yeah, I guess my thought was what's going to happen at the work session is going to be the full. There really isn't any phasing in the plan. I don't think this actually has a formal phasing to it. I don't think that the next application necessarily will be a phased application on the work session, but knowing the fact that if they are going to phase, if they're actually coming up out of the ground in different phases, if half the building is up and they have a change to the other half, they have that opportunity to address that in a design review modification.
So we've seen all the buildings on the site.
Or we will
Or
at the next work session.
okay, today.
Right.
Today, we've seen everything. Because I guess what I was hearing and just not understanding correctly is that there's another building that we haven't seen, but you're proposing that it's going to be similar in architecture to the rest of the development.
You want me to open that back up so the applicant maybe can address those? You guys fine with that?
Or
Josh, you want to?
Josh, you can comment
I
as well.
can jump on here real quick too, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Committee member Aguilar. So yeah, you did see the entire project back in May of 2021. I think the changes they brought tonight were a little more substantial than we were expecting. We were expecting the work session to address these 3 items. Sounds like there's some pretty significant changes to architecture. So you have seen the buildings, but now with this new design and changes, I think seeing a complete package of both buildings at a work session to then be able to approve, that follows our typical process, gives the public the opportunity to comment, and everything would be square. And Mr. Chairman was right. There is no approved phasing plan. So it would be sort of an informal phasing plan they're proposing, but it's just in our previous approval. And in this one here, it's one project.
Okay.
So just to clarify that, Josh, real quick. So if, for example, that phase 1 is completed and the second phase isn't coming out of the construction, when they come in with CDs or whatever, and it only shows phase 1, that's a red flag, I guess, for planning that, hey, this isn't what was approved.
Correct.
And they would have to have a modification to either scale back the building and not build a portion of it. So I think there's avenues in place to protect that.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody need to ask the applicant anything? I think, is it fairly clear? Okay. Well, with that, anybody want to take a stab at a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
Just before making a motion, I just wanted to state that on the May 12th of 2021 approval and the requirements that came out of that, the 3 items that came out of that, I think with the exception of some wording in that first item there, that we basically this evening, the applicant has met the criteria for 1, 2, and 3. I would say that the portion of that first sentence that says, along with any subsequent changes to the building and site layout that occur as a result of final approval, that particular portion of that requirement has not been met this evening. And that's what we're looking to address in our next meeting for both phase 1 and phase 2.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. With that, let me try this. Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the work session drawings dated and received on July 5th, 2022, per the discussion and findings contained in the work session memo for the hearing dated August 10th, 2022, with the following additional conditions of approval, M and N, and the deletion in the dated memo that the applicant will be required to submit at a future advertised public work session to address any and all subsequent changes to phase 1 and phase 2 of the building and site layout that occur as a result of the continued design.
Okay, so moved.
Something
Do we,
that makes sense.
yeah, I
Mr.
guess
Chair.
the fact that we don't have a phased plan.
That was my question is, I don't think we have a phase plan. So,
Oh,
I think we could-
I mean, we're just kind of talking like we're going to do this part first and this part second, but I don't think we actually have a phase plan.
oh,
So I'd be concerned with that language
so take the
specifically.
phases out.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree to that.
Okay, we got a motion and
Mr. Chair,
yeah,
can I just clarify real quick for the motion? So the additional condition of approval O would be that any subsequent changes to the building and site layout that occur as a result of continued design are reviewed at a future work session.
Correct.
That's fine.
Okay, so moved. Any other discussion on the motion?
I would second the motion.
Okay. Motion second, discussion. Hearing none, can you please call the roll?
Simple,
Aye.
Kabala,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Erstad,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, you got that. The work session now. Yeah. I know that face one does is.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's still going. What's still going? Yep.
Just change that date here. What's the date, 10th? All right.
Should we let Miss Nikki hand out her food or should we get?
Oh, I can just jump into it. Yep.
Just go?
Yep.
All right. Perfect. Well, good evening, Design Review Committee. For the record, Andrea Tuning in Planning and Development. When we started the zoning code rewrite process back in 2019, we wanted to keep you apprised as we went along, and that was a promise that we made to you. So we visited with you first regarding our module 1, which was really those zoning districts and allowed uses. We came back and shared some design standards with you as part of module 2. And after we went out for our public outreach for module 2, we had heard a number of comments that the community didn't feel that we quite had our foundation correct. And so we took a step back and said, well, let's reevaluate what module 1 and 2 established so we have a really good framework that we can build upon. And so we have done some modifications in regard to the public feedback that we have gotten from our elected officials, our appointed officials, as well as our community. So we wanted to share with you the framework changes that we have established with module 1 and 2 so that you are aware of those, and then you can prepare for module 3, which will probably be back to visit with you, I'm guessing in November of this year. So just to kind of go over, we will be reviewing those module 1 and 2 framework changes, talking a little bit about next steps, and then really allowing you an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have as we have evolved. So as we had noticed, earlier, the project originally kicked off in actually 2019, but we did have some leadership changes that took place. So the project was placed on pause. Our official kickoff began in the fall of 2020, and we really asked our community what they wanted to see. And as a result of that, we brought them the draft module 1 in the spring of 2021. We went out to the public to see what they thought about our established zoning districts and some of those allowed uses that would be allowed in those zoning districts. And we felt relatively comfortable moving to module 2. And in the winter and spring of 2022, we released Module 2 and did a really extensive outreach effort that took place. We visited across the city at 7 different neighborhood conversations. So we visited 7 different planning areas. We had 15 targeted events that we went to visit with different jurisdictions, different agencies, and individuals with different areas of expertise. And we developed that development and design standards piece as part of that. As I noted previously, we did take a step back to make sure that we had module 1 and 2 correct. And so we have just finished up our outreach efforts. And so we're going to kind of walk you through what we have shared with our community. So when we went out with module 1 and 2, the biggest things that we heard is that the one size fits all approach simply does not fit across all of the city, that we do have different neighborhoods that have different characters. And so they wanted a unique approach. They also decided that they wanted us to consider the impacts to our existing infrastructure as we continued to grow and evolve as a city. Individuals noted specifically that affordability was a huge concern, as well as sustainability, specifically in regard to our housing stock that we had throughout the city of Boise. And they wanted us to be able to manage growth, that we don't want to grow everywhere. So based on what we heard from the community, we have taken a leap of faith, and we have decided that having a variety of great neighborhoods is okay. And so an individualized approach is certainly appropriate. We really want to direct development where we do have planned public investment. So that might be where we have seen existing investment, or we have immediately funded in the future investment happening. We also want to have a solid strategy where we can produce the type of affordable and sustainable housing that we are looking for within our city. And then, of course, managing growth along the edges of the city so that we are not growing everywhere. As part of that, we did recognize that we have large lots, we have suburban lots and traditional lots. And then as we look at the building form, oftentimes we have compact development and urban development as well. And it's okay to have these various forms. So when we look at the particular zones of residential uses here, we originally, if you recall, R1A and R1B were actually proposed to be merged into a singular unit. But because we have agreed that it is okay to have large lots throughout our city of Boise, we have maintained that R1A zone. So you're going to see that come back. We also identified some changes in regard to density. So R1A and R1B look very similar to what you originally saw. However, R1C now has a density of 12 dwelling units to the acre versus 8 that we currently have. And in the original, you would have noticed that there were no densities, that we said density doesn't specifically apply in our residential zones if you can meet those form and function requirements. So based on community feedback, we have brought that density back and modified the density for R1C. With that density change in R1C, it does change the lot size allowed in the R1C zone. So we were originally at 4,000 square feet, and now we're proposing 3,500. The calculation to get us there was 43,560 square feet per acre. We went ahead and divided that by 12, which gets us to the 3,500 square feet. We have evaluated our height for buildings allowed in both the R1C, R2, and R3 zones. Some of that is because we are measuring, or we're proposing to measure things a little bit differently. If you're familiar with the height requirements of the city code, if you have a gabled roof, we were measuring to the midline of the roof. There was a lot of concern with how that was measured. Oftentimes dormers expanded that entire second floor, and people argued that that was a part of the structure and was much taller than a midline of a roof. And so we said, you're probably right. Let's go ahead and measure from the highest point of the structure and we'll give some allowance to do that. And so we have increased the R1C height from 35 to 40. R2 has been increased as well, so it'll go to 45 feet, and then R3 will go to 50 feet. That should allow for the measurement to occur, but it might also allow for an additional floor if the right building design was created. When we look at allowed uses, you're going to see that we do have the townhome or the attached unit, which would now be allowed in the R1C zone, which it was not before. And then we also have created an allowance for a neighborhood market, cafe, or small retail to exist in that R1C zone if certain criteria are met. That was a result of a significant amount of public feedback we heard from our community that said, we want places that we can walk. We want to have coffee shops. We want to have donut shops, ice cream shops, and small retail that are accessible to our neighborhoods where we as individuals and our families can walk to. We also expanded in the R2, saying that fourplexes, townhouses, apartments, and neighborhood markets and cafes are also allowed in that R2 zone, as well as the R3. And one of the sustainability and affordability requirements, we have created some incentive programs. And so there's actually 2 different incentive programs, and Lena's going to talk about that in just a little bit in greater detail, but it does allow in certain circumstances, if you're located in the correct location within the city and you meet certain criteria, it does allow for triplexes, fourplexes, and townhomes to be built in the R1A, R1B, and R1C. And then in addition to those products, we also allow cottage village and apartments in the R1B and R1C zones. So I'm going to kick it over to Lena Walker, and she's going to walk you through some of those changes in regard to zoning districts.
Good evening. So the first part of this to sort of walk the committee through is getting back to one of those pillars of our framework that we've come to of directing development where we have planned public investment. Something we really heard a lot in our community outreach was that we need to support the areas where we've already invested a significant amount of public resources and find a way to incorporate the benefits that we get from land use and development and how it can support that investment as well. And one of the ways that we're proposing to do this is establishing new mixed use zones that have really strong urban design requirements in these areas. And you can see on this map the general overview of what those areas would be. So you have the downtown planning area, identified transit-oriented development stations along State Street, our best-in-class transit routes, which would be State Street, Vista, and Fairview, as well as our pathway corridors that have been pretty significantly built out at this point. So the Green Belt and then also the Federal Way multi-use path, as well as our regional and community activity centers from Blueprint Boise. So kind of starting off with downtown on that list, we're really using the downtown planning area as our framework for how we think about directing some of our most intense mixed use development. So we have a new mixed use zone called MX5 or mixed use downtown. There's no density calculation, and the conversion on the map here would be all properties that would be C2, C3, C4, or RO within that downtown planning area would be automatically converted to that MX5. Next, we have our State Street transit stations. So there's 4 nodes that are identified from the State Street transit plan. And this would be a mixed use transit-oriented development. So again, no density calculation. There would be a 60-foot height limit, but potential to waive that if there's affordable housing incorporated, and no minimum setbacks, but also requirements for wide sidewalks. So trying to really achieve that urban and transit supportive built form and along the areas of State Street where we really want to see it. Building off of that, we have MX3 or mixed use active. And so again, this is going to be State Street, Fairview, Vista, Greenbelt, Federal Way, and then regional and community activity centers. Again, no density calculation there and a 60-foot height limit and no minimum setback, but again, requirements for wide sidewalks, urban tree canopy, and other things to really support multimodal transportation throughout our city. A key component of this along State, Fairview, and Vista is to also really recognize that we need to have some sort of coherent transition from these corridors into the interior of the residential neighborhoods. And so along with this, there's a proposal to convert residential properties that are R1A, R1B, or R1C. If they're within an 1/8 mile of those identified corridors, they would be converted to R2. So really trying to address, not only do we have these sort of neighborhood transition standards for how the buildings themselves may actually step down, but trying to open up some additional potential for those properties that might be right next to commercial properties that are converting to MX3 and how we can create more coherence along those corridors. Then we have some other kinds of mixed use. The MX2 or the mixed use general, really trying to speak to the recognition that, not everywhere in our city is going to be totally multimodal, but that we do have some, we have that variety of neighborhoods, variety of places. And there are some places where that more traditional, by traditional, I mean more auto-oriented uses would also be appropriate. So you can see there on the map, it's on some of our other kind of main thoroughfares, and then also some areas around the mall and by the airport. And then finally, it's a little pale on this map, but we have mixed use neighborhood, or MX1. And this is really getting at those small neighborhood scale uses. So when we think about, directing development where we have planned public investment, one of the things that, is certainly a goal for the city, and we've heard strong feedback from the community, is wanting to have other ways for people to get around than just driving their car. And another component of that is places that people can actually walk to within their neighborhood. So the MX1 aims to address those needs and really create great spaces that are accessible by foot from residential neighborhoods. The other side of this, so that's the rundown of what the different kinds of zones are. And then we also heard from our community that we really need to have strategies for how we're going to provide affordable and sustainable development throughout the city. And we have a couple different approaches that we're proposing to that. The first one here, previously, when we had done our Module 2 outreach, the recommendation was to allow for up to a 4-plex throughout all residential zones in the city with no additional requirements. And what we're proposing here for R1A, R1B, and R1C is that you could build up to a triplex or a 4-plex, but it comes with some specific requirements, and those would be that either one of 3 or 2 of 4 of those units would need to be affordable to households earning 80% AMI for a rental product or 120% AMI for an ownership product. And that would be, that requirement would be in place for 50 years. And in addition to that, there would be requirements about incorporating design and infrastructure elements that support our various goals for clean energy and wise use of our water. We also have a proposal for a strategic infill incentive. So this is really getting at a sort of surgical approach to develop that missing middle or small scale density housing in areas that are really well set up to accommodate that and support it. So that would be either vacant or underutilized parcels within existing developed areas. And I can break that down a little bit more for you. So this map here is showing all the properties that would meet those locational requirements, the first 2 bullet points. So we started this from saying this would apply to the R1B or R1C zone. And you are also within 300 feet of a collector or minor arterial, or within a 1/4 mile of a property that is going to be zoned MX3. So that's the starting point there. And then in addition to that, you would have to meet some site-specific characteristics, which would be, as currently proposed, 55 feet of frontage, And it would be either a vacant lot or one where the improvement or structure value is not greater than 25% of the total assessed value. Or if you can incorporate the existing structure without having to remove it. So preserving some of that naturally occurring affordable housing or more traditional architecture. And then also there would be a requirement that you could not have an approved demolition permit for the property within the past 3 years. So wanting to protect against, we don't want to create a mechanism where folks are just tearing down housing to build up something new, but we also want to encourage the possibility for folks to increase the density within their lot. So how this would break down is if you wanted to do 3 to 4 units, there's no affordability requirement. You could do all the way up to 12 units. If you were doing 5 to 8, one of those would need to be dedicated affordable at 80% AMI, and then 9 to 12, 2 of those units would need to be dedicated affordable at 80% AMI. And for those affordable units, you could potentially be eligible for a parking reduction in order to support that development. And these are just some different examples you might recognize from around town. There's a lot of different things that you could do with this infill incentive. You know, cottage courts, duplexes, triplexes, townhomes. There's a variety of options that we're looking here, and it's really that flexibility and creativity that we're wanting to support with that incentive. In addition, in the MX3 and MX4, so again, those active corridors or TOD nodes, we have an incentive that would allow you to reduce the minimum parking requirements and also waive those height limits if 25% of all units are affordable to households earning 60% AMI or below for 50 years, and then incorporating some of those sustainability criteria. So having energy efficiency in the design of the building or water saving implementations. And then finally, our last piece of this. So, you know, we want to direct development where we have that planned public investment. And we also want to be careful and recognize that we don't want to just develop everywhere. We don't want to sprawl everywhere. So some of the tools that can help us with that is we're proposing to create a new zone. So currently we have the A1 and the A2. This would create open land 1, 2, and 3. And that O3 zone would be a managed land designation that would have specific restrictions on recognizing that, you know, there's limits on the amount of development we would want to see in those areas. And this could be potentially a tool that would help us as we look to revise our annexation policies of being able to recognize as land comes in around the edges of our city, that we actually have a zone that speaks to how we envision the use of it, as opposed to, you know, having sort of ambiguity around that. We also have our overlays of the Boise River system and the wildland urban interface. These overlays don't preclude development, but they do speak to needing to incorporate specific design criteria around building materials, defensible space, and other rules that help to allow for a more peaceful interface between our human development and then our flora and our fauna that we really treasure and see as an integral part of our city. And that's it. And Andrea and I would certainly be happy to stand for any questions that the committee has.
Great, thank you. Questions?
Just a comment.
Yeah.
I'm on the rewrite committee, and I just want to thank Andrea and the whole team for all you guys' hard work, especially with the affordable housing conversations that we've been having, because there's definitely a lot of need. There's a lot of wants. And you guys have been doing a really great job of educating the committee and others about, even though we want these things, we have limitations by law and legislature and whatnot, and just educating us on how we can codify some of this stuff or why we can't. And there's just been a lot of conversation about it. And I just really, really appreciate all your hard work on this and educating us. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're probably out of time, huh?
Mr. Chairman, if you have some questions or some comments
Okay.
you want to make, we could start the public hearing just a couple minutes late would be fine.
Anybody else have anything you want to?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Just I had a couple questions. particularly the open manage or the open land with the management, does that preclude like any development? That's kind of how it read when last I looked at the updated use allowed use table. I mean, maybe you can put like a cell tower there if you've got a CUP is what it looked like to me, or is that kind of like a super large lot allowed use?
Committee member Erstad, ultimately the O3, we would think about like as our foothills area. So there may be an opportunity for like a cell phone tower or a restroom facility, maybe a small trailhead, something to that extent, or even maybe the one dwelling unit for 40 acres. But we would not be looking for development to occur in those locations.
So would there be some sort of mechanism for compensating all of the people that own land there that had some intention of eventually doing something with it, but now can't?
Most of those are actually city-owned parcels that are out there. So when we take a look at that, and you can actually get online. So if you have an interest in looking at how a zone is changing and what it exists today, you have the ability to bring it up simultaneously, and it'll tell you what that existing zone is and what the proposed zone is. So yes, most of those are city-owned.
Then as far as the sustainability requirements, well, actually started to backtrack a little bit. In the areas like the R1, which is 2 units per acre, assuming you hit the sustainability goals and such, to put a fourplex there, would that still be subject to those density requirements?
No, it would
Okay.
not. And so that is the special allowance. So it's very similar to what we have today in our residential zones. You're allowed to do single family or duplex, and density is not a cap for you. And so we would allow that because you're meeting the goals of affordability and sustainability and contributing to the city. Largely, we'll remove that cap in these particular cases.
Has there been feedback from, I know there are a couple developers on the rewrite committee. Have they indicated whether that's even going to actually produce any new housing units, or is that something that at this moment is largely unattainable from a profitability standpoint?
That's a really great question. We actually just had that conversation at our last citywide advisory committee meeting. We do have a couple of individuals that are taking a deep dive. They're working with some individuals to create pro formas to see, will that actually produce what we're looking for? Because we want everything to be effective. And of course, we also want to look at not only does it work today, but as our economy evolves, land prices evolve as well, will it work in the future? Because we are trying to be forward thinking as we're evaluating these things.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. Just as a general comment, I want to say that I'm really excited about the new turn that you guys have taken as far as the really strategic rezoning rather than just going from existing zones to kind of a translation. I think that the downtown zone is going to really help kick out the stops from a lot of projects that would, languish through the rezone process over several months and then go through DR and then all of that. I think that this is going to be a great mechanism to kind of juice the system and hopefully add a lot of housing stock, add a lot of, redevelopment within our existing infrastructure, as you guys have pointed out. So I'm just really excited about all the work that you guys have been doing. Thank you for the considerable effort.
Agreed. Thank you. Anything else? Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And if you want to stay involved in the process, we'll be going back out to the community beginning in October, and then we'll visit with you as soon as we've had an opportunity to talk to the community about Module 3 so that you're apprised of where we're headed with that.
Great. Thank you.
Did I just close yours out?
All right, Mr. Chairman, we're just a couple minutes overdue here, but we can go ahead and get started with the public hearing. Just 3 items on the agenda tonight. A deferral, number 1, and then I believe the other 2 we will propose for consent we'll see if we have any public and if the applicant is in agreement with both of those, but we would propose them for consent.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Questions on those? No. This time we'll close the public or the work session. And with that, we will call the August 10th, 2022 Design Review Committee meeting to order. Christine, please call the roll.
Simple,
Here.
Zabala,
Here.
Rudine, Marsh,
Here.
Aguilar,
Here.
Zuckerman, Erstad,
Here.
5 present, 2 absent.
Great. Next item is to take a motion on the July 13th, 2020 minutes. Would you like to make a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Stead.
I move that we approve the minutes from July 13th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Aguilar.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I will be recusing my vote as I was not in attendance.
Okay, thank you. With that, Christina, will you please call the roll.
Zabala,
Aye.
Marsh.
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Erstad,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
And we have one item up for deferral tonight. That item is number 1. It's DRH 21-00376. Location is 6259 South Pleasant Valley Roads for the construction of a new approximately 1,080,289 square foot warehouse and distribution center. This would be deferred to the September 14th hearing. Is there been any member of the audience or online wishing to speak to this item who cannot make this September 14th date? Seeing none in person, any Josh online? Okay, that concludes our items for deferral, and I would be open for a motion on the deferrals at this time.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Stead.
I move that we defer item DRH 21-00376 to the September 14th committee meeting.
Great, so move.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Simple. With that, Christina, will you please call the roll?
Simple,
Aye.
Zabala,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Erstad,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
The first item we are considering for tonight's consent agenda is item number 2. It's DRH 22-00274. The location is 13839 Meadowdale Street for the construction of a new approximately 3,500 square foot office building in a property in an NOD zone. And is the applicant present?
Yes, I
Online?
am.
Yes, great. And are you in agreement with the recommended conditions of approval?
Yes, me and my client are.
Great, thank you. Are there any members of the public wishing to testify in opposition to this item tonight? Seeing none in person, any online? Great, seeing none, this item will be moved to the consent agenda. Second item would be DRH 22-00270, locations 1404 South Philippi Street for the construction of a new multifamily development with 108 residential units and 6 buildings with a clubhouse located in a C2D zone. And is the applicant present?
Yes.
Does the record show the applicant is present, and are you in agreement with the recommended conditions of approval?
Yes.
Let the record show that the applicant is in agreement. Are there any members of the public wishing to testify in opposition to this item, either in person or online? Seeing none in either spot, this will also be moved to the consent agenda. And with that, I'll be open to take a motion on the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Zabala.
I would move to approve DRH 22-00274 and DRH 22-00270 as recommended in the findings of fact and the conclusions of law and recommended conditions of approval noted in the respective project reports.
Okay, so moved.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Christina, you please call the roll.
Simple,
Aye.
Zabala,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Erstad,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.